This day is given to us beyond anything we could create or earn. Whether deserved or undeserved, this day comes to us as a gift from the universe, a gift from God, a gift from life itself. So come and let us worship with gratitude for this and so many gifts, with humility for our shortcomings, resilience to face the struggles ahead, and let us worship with hope that we may continue to transform our lives and to transform our world.
Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach our divisions? I call upon your spurs and reach our divisions. I call upon your voices and reach our divisions. I reach out to voices and reach our divisions. I call upon your voices and reach our divisions. I call upon your voices and reach our divisions. I call upon your voices and reach our divisions. I reach out to voices and reach our divisions. I call upon your voices and reach our divisions. I call upon your voices and reach our divisions. I call upon your voices and reach our divisions. I reach out to voices and reach our divisions. With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
Well, good morning and welcome to our virtual worship service here at the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. I am Reverend Eric Posa, interim minister. Pleased to be joined today by our music director, Lee Hartman, and Stephen Nolan Babcock, and our audiovisual booth. We are so glad that even in this virtual way that we have safely available to us during this spike in COVID numbers. We are grateful that you have joined us from wherever you may be it close by or far away. There is much that happens in this church. Our building may again be closed, but our church is open nonetheless. So please take a look at our church website for more information about the various activities that are going on. And if you're not already getting them, sign up for our email to keep updated on what's happening in the life of this congregation. We are so glad you've joined us. Welcome. So we're talking about intimacy today in worship, and that's a word that a lot of people think means some really specific things. A lot of people, when they hear the word intimacy, they automatically think about romance or maybe sex, but it can mean a lot more than that. Intimacy is, and at its best can be, about how we relate to each other in deep ways. How we can go beyond just the surface and just the "hi, how you doing" kind of questions that we casually might ask each other, and really build the kind of relationships with each other where people can be comfortable sharing some of their deeper feelings, their deeper thoughts and experiences, some of the harder aspects of their lives, as well as the most joyous ones, in a way that maybe you wouldn't do with just somebody you knew kind of casually saw occasionally. In church, in religious community, we talk about building intimacy and understanding, like one of our Unitarian theologians and ministers used to say, that church is where we practice what it means to be human. And that part of that is practicing how to be more appropriately intimate with each other. And I recently was told by a colleague of mine, by another minister I know, about a metaphor that she actually learned from working with youth groups up in the Northeast. And those who are or have recently been youth here, perhaps you're familiar with this one as well. But it's a metaphor about what it means to be in an intimate community, especially a smaller community as part of a church, like a youth group, or maybe one of our branches, small group ministries. And it's understanding a group that connects with each other as if they're in a closed circle. Or, if you want another metaphor for it, a donut. Donuts are great. Donuts are sweet and tasty, and so can small communities be. And there's sometimes when that kind of closed intimacy can be appropriate. I mean, if you know somebody in your small circle of friends or close family who's in the hospital, and we'll presume it's something non-contagious, and particularly sometime before the COVID pandemic, when we could go visit each other easily in hospitals, then you don't necessarily want the casual acquaintances stopping by your hospital room, but the people in your circle, the people you have the deep, rich relationships with. Those are the right people to connect with you. But there's a downside, because being in this closed circle can shut people out, can shut others out, can close off the possibility for other people to come in and also build intimate relations with us, and for us to build intimate relations with them, to get to know them at those deeper levels. So for that, we need a metaphor that allows us to open up the circle, to have a way for others to connect to it, like a croissant. Because croissants are not closed. They come together kind of in a C shape, but there's a way for openness that allows for others to connect with us. When we're talking about these kinds of relationships, yes, there's a lot of closeness that happens in these groups, but in ways that don't close them off to others as well. As we're thinking about how to, in some cases, rebuild the intimacy in some of our relationships, as we're coming back together, as hopefully these surges of the pandemic decrease, diminish, become less frequent, last for shorter periods, then I hope we're not just locking ourselves in to the closed relationships, even though we're also valuing them, but we're also allowing ourselves to be open to build some intimacy with others. Well, we do share with one another in so many ways as we worship together. Let us take a moment for sharing of those deeper life transitions that may have impacted us. And we do have a few to lift up. We have to lift up, sadly, 2 stones of condolence. One for Bobby Thompson on the death of his brother, Helvius Thompson, and one for Wayne Parker on the death of his mother, Sadie Parker. But we also have a stone of congratulations, this one for Betty Powers, on the birth of her new granddaughter. Fiona Margaret Hinkle was born on August 2nd. We know that there are so many other life transitions that are impacting us in these days. If you have one to share, let's do so virtually. I'll place the stone in your absence, but you at home, particularly if you're on a platform that has a chat function or a comment function, post online. You can just put an asterisk to represent your stone. Some people choose to name who the stone is for. Let us share now. And we light the flame in our chalice, symbol of our freely covenanted Unitarian Universalist faith, saying together, with hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love. I love my work as an interim minister, and I love living in different parts of the country as I travel to do different interim ministries. But it does have a downside. I rarely get to live near friends, longtime friends especially, people who've known me for much of my life. The people I care about and people who've cared about me for long periods are just not as easily accessible to me now than they once were. I can't drive 5 or 10 minutes to meet them at a local restaurant or bar. I can't join them in classes regularly. Now, of course, for the last year and a half, that's been true for most of us during this pandemic. For me, it's been true for a decade as I've done these interim ministries. And as good as this ministry has been, that aspect of it can be isolating at times, which is why I've come to deeply value those times when I can reconnect and work to find them. I think of my best friend from high school. His name's Nick, and I mentioned him actually in last week's sermon as well. Well, the last time I saw Nick, it was 4 years ago, and coincidentally, purely by coincidence, it was 4 years ago tonight. I had traveled back to my hometown where my mother had just been placed on hospice care. She would pass away 2.5 to 3 months later. And I spent the week there, but found that in the evenings with her going to bed early and not staying at home, I had time to connect with others and arranged to have dinner one evening with Nick. And we found ourselves sitting in a burger joint in a suburb between Dallas and Fort Worth, near where we both had gone to high school, and having the kind of deep conversation you don't always expect to have when you're reconnecting with someone. And it even touched on some themes not so different from what we talked about before, what I had talked about rather last week, because it did touch on some religious subjects. And I mentioned that though Nick and I were both agnostics when we were in high school, my views had changed over time, and I am now a lot more theistic, but I've still had some doubts throughout my life about an experience of an afterlife, about whether we would have a conscious experience after our deaths. It's something I've always doubted, questioned. Nick has changed, but in a different way, I found. We, on talking, learned that while I was now one who had come to believe in God, but not so much in an afterlife, he was still somewhat agnostic about God, but he had come to have a couple of powerful experiences that led him to believe that an afterlife was real. We weren't in the same place. Our views didn't agree in the way that they had back when we were in high school. But after 30 years of building trust and friendship and relationship, we could have the kind of conversation about that where we could get deeply into and feel safe getting deeply into what the differences were and what they meant for us, how they impacted our lives. It was a rich conversation that I'll not soon forget. And it helped me to realize that even though I may not be physically close to him and to other friends, I was not nearly so isolated as I occasionally led myself to believe. I had for a while that emotional separation emerge from the physical separation that my travels created with so many of my friends. But when I convince myself that my friends are gone, then I'm taking a chance of convincing myself that any emotional intimacy I may perceive is just a mirage. But physical distance does not mean that the people I'm close to are any less interested than hearing from me. He and a couple of other close friends that I got to visit on that trip, plus some friends I got to visit on travels back near home just a few months ago, helped me to see the error in that view. I can still look to those I care about for emotional support, whether it's on occasional visits or by staying in touch long distance, now that we have so many means in the era of social media for doing that. So I hope we'll consider today how it is that we can build and how we can maintain intimacy for ourselves and with others. And we'll start that in the next part of the sermon in a few minutes. Again, I saw vanity under the sun. The case of solitary individuals without children or siblings, yet there is no end to all their toil, and their eyes are never satisfied with riches. For whom am I toiling, they ask, and depriving myself of pleasure? This also is vanity and an unhappy business. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up the other. But woe to one who is alone and falls and does not have another to help. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And though one might prevail against another, two will withstand one. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. Two are better than one, Jewish scripture tells us. And that speaks to how intimacy can enrich our lives, deepen our lives beyond what we can achieve for ourselves alone. Now, I do not fall for the stereotype that intimacy only means romantic or sexual relationships, as some threads of our popular culture would have us believe. Sure, intimate relationships can include sex and romance, or it can exclude them. What truly makes a relationship intimate is how it connects us to the deepest parts of one another, so that we reveal that which lies deep within our souls. That's the root of the word intimacy. It's from a Latin term that means that which is most within. Each of us has aspects of ourselves that do reach deep down into our beings, that dwell in those inner layers of our souls. And the more of these deep layers we share with someone, the more intimate our relationship with them grows. And there's so many avenues to lead us to greater intimacy with one another. In our friendships, our family relationships, we can open ourselves more fully through deep conversations, through the sharing of meaningful experiences. One example that I've been thinking of this last week is the experience of sharing music that's meaningful to you with someone you care about. About a dozen years or so ago, I found myself deepening my friendship with someone who at the time was a seminary student, is now a fellow minister. And part of our emerging connection was realizing that we shared some deep common musical tastes, including for a few artists that aren't quite as well known. I've been reflecting on this because one of those artists that we connected over just passed away this past week, the singer-songwriter Nancy Griffith. But my friend and I got into the pattern of trading mix CDs with each other of bits of music that we weren't so sure the other one would be as familiar with, but that we thought they might appreciate. And by talking about what those songs meant to us, why they resonated with us, helped us to learn so much more about each other than we would have nearly as quickly had we not had that shared experience of music to tie us. Now, sure, in certain other relationships, including those with life partners and spouses, there are factors that can open us even more intimately to each other. That can happen through sexual encounters. It can happen through romantic gestures like love notes. But there also can be times when even romance and sex can become barriers to genuine intimacy if we're using them to cover up our true feelings and thoughts rather than reveal them. But the other thing that strikes me about intimacy is that it's not unique to one-on-one relationships. It can thrive in community as well. When a group of people trust each other enough to let their deep pains and triumphs be known to one another, the group changes. Bonds become thicker. People respond to one another in new ways. We think often how individuals can serve the group, but over time, the group finds how to serve its individual members as well as the group grows more intimate. One proverb attributed to being an African proverb notes that it takes the whole body to bend down and pull a thorn from the foot. And sometimes people we are in group, in small community with, come to share deeper experiences, feelings, values that make each of them most fully who they are. Then the group can move collectively to care more authentically, more effectively when one of its members is in need. And sometimes can do so even before that person has expressed the need. Think of 12-step programs. One of the reasons that programs like Alcoholics Anonymous are effective for many people, not all, but for many, is that recovering alcoholics do not work through the 12 steps in isolation, but as part of a home group. At best, not just attending meetings, but regularly attending one meeting where the members come to know each other, understand each other's particular struggles, and learn over time how to help one another return to a path of sanity. In the process, the intimacy within the group builds. And we can also grow into more intimacy with what is sacred for us. I'll say more about that shortly. I invite us now into that time of deeper sharing as we share a time of prayer. So I encourage you to reach deep within yourself, reach far beyond yourself to connect with that which you know to be sacred. Let us pray. Spirit of life and of love, God, whom we know by so many names and mystery beyond all of our naming, we come together in our many locations, knowing ourselves deep in the heat of this summer and knowing where we are in time, that we are starting to reconnect even across the challenges of this pandemic as schools are reopening, affecting so many families. but also aware all too painfully of the challenges we still face as the numbers of cases of this pandemic are spiking still. Help us in these tense and confusing times to find a balance, find the safety that is appropriate for us and those around us, while also in that safety finding ways to stay connected to one another, praying that all that we know will be well, and that those who are not well may heal quickly. May we go forth, and may we know ourselves to be loved and cared for as we love and care for others. So may it be for us all. Amen. Friendship has been a source of great pain for you. You desired it so much that you often lost yourself in the search for a true friend. Many of your friendships grew from your need for affection, affirmation, emotional support. But now, you must seek friends to whom you can relate from your center, from the place where you know that you are deeply loved. Friendship becomes more and more possible when you accept yourself as deeply loved. Then you can be with others in a non-possessive way. Dare to love and to be a real friend. The love you give and receive is a reality that will lead you closer and closer to God as well as to those you love. If you heard my sermon last week, you may recall this quote from the Unitarian theologian James Luther Adams. The principal things that concern me are intimacy and ultimacy, the intimate and the ultimate. The ultimate, as I reflected on last week, refers to our highest values, beliefs, concerns, to that which is worthy of providing us with primary guidance throughout our lives. But intimacy, just as much as ultimacy, is a gift. It's a gift we can gain from our encounters with what is sacred in our lives. And the two gifts are closely related. I particularly appreciate how that relationship between them was described by Rachel Barenblatt. Barenblatt is a rabbi serving a synagogue in Western Massachusetts. She's also one of America's most respected religious bloggers, and her blog has the best name. It's called the Velveteen Rabbi. She writes on one entry how it is that we can have an intimate relationship, not only with each other, but with that which is ultimate for us. She does this in an online commentary on a passage from Deuteronomy, from Torah, Jewish scripture. And in her commentary, she wrote, "We want, as this week's Torah portion could suggest, to be in relationship with a God who we already know. Of course, relationship with God is a self-perpetuating phenomenon. If I understand myself to be in continuing, evolving relationship with the source of being, then everything I experience comes through that lens. But if I find God to be distant and unknowable, that's a self-perpetuating phenomenon too. So how is it that we relate to the source of being, especially if we don't experience it as a separate, personal, supernatural being?" Her advice: connect with God in whatever way opens itself to us. Maybe that means prayer, offering the words of one's heart to whatever one understands God to mean. Maybe that means encountering the splendor of the natural world, waterfalls, mountains, rolling hills. Maybe it means finding holiness in relationship with a beloved friend and extrapolating from that sanctified relationship a sense that all relationships can be sanctified. For it's through our intimate relationships, she concludes, that we can discern the sense of the ultimate that can add meaning to any relationship. Somebody else who knew something of intimacy was Henry Nauen, the Dutch Catholic priest and spiritual writer who we just heard from in the reading. One of his earlier books focused exclusively on the religious meaning of intimacy, but he wrote in that later book that we just heard, The Inner Voice of Love. Well, that book was written in the wake of the abrupt ending of one of his most intimate friendships. This was someone who had helped him, in his words, let go many of my inner guards and open my heart more fully to others. Losing this friendship, and he never says why it ended, but losing it drove him into deep anguish. And the book is his journal entries that he wrote during that intense time. I first discovered the book just a couple of weeks after my separation from my first wife. The raw passion of Nauen's struggle spoke deeply to me in that painful time, and frankly, it still does today. There's another passage from that same book in which Nauen counsels himself. The love that came to you in particular concrete human friendships and that awakened your dormant desire to be completely and unconditionally loved was real and authentic. It does not have to be denied as dangerous or idolatrous. When we fear the ways that intimacy can show up in our lives, how it can make us vulnerable, well, that's risky stuff, this opening ourselves to intimacy. Henry Nauen learned that lesson all too painfully. But if we close ourselves off from the vulnerabilities that come with intimacy, we're also shutting out the possibility of real love, real transformation. We are called occasionally, not in every relationship, but in our closest relationships, with the ones we love and trust most. We're called to take real risks, to disclose much of what we normally cloak in protective layers of silence or secrecy, and when we do, the benefits can be enormous. We'll conclude shortly by considering how we can recommit to intimacy together.
You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love forward. One foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love forward. One foot in front of the other and lead with love. Don't give up. Don't give up. You're not alone. You're not alone. Don't you give up. Don't you give up. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love forward. One foot in front of the other and lead with love. Lift up your eyes. Lift up your eyes. Don't you despair. here I am, right next to you, right next to you. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love forward. One foot in front of the other and lead with love. Don't give up hope, don't give up hope. You're not alone, you're not alone. Don't you give up, don't you give up. Keep moving on, keep moving on. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love forward. One foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love forward. One foot in front of the other and lead with love.
Well, we share with one another in so many ways as we worship together, be it in person or virtually. I invite us now to take a moment for a tangible expression of that sharing as we prepare to receive the morning's offering. And it's not only for the continued good works of this congregation, but as is now our practice, every Sunday we share our offering with an organization in our area which is doing good works in consort with our Unitarian Universalist values. In the month of August, we're sharing our offering with Humanities Amped, which is committed to amplifying youth well-being, critical literacy, and community-minded problem solving in public schools. So in the many ways to give, in one of the many ways to give, which I believe are being posted now, including on the Give page on our church website, we invite you to take a moment now to give generously as our offering is gratefully received. We don't always have the luxury of safe space to take the kinds of emotional chances I was speaking of at the end of the last segment. Taking those leaps can be scary, even as we long for the intimacy that can result from them. But having some area of your life where the risks are a bit less scary can help. And I think that's one reward of church life. It can nurture the intentional circles of trust and of love, can hold space where these risks of vulnerability lower so that more of us are willing to engage. I'm reminded of something written by a colleague, Mellon Kennedy, who at the time was with First UU Society of Burlington, Vermont. His article was entitled The Wellspring of Intimacy. And in it, that described a time when a small group meeting in his church experienced one of those times of intimacy. from a group member named Dan. Dan had just been telling us, Kennedy wrote, he's an introvert. In an unassuming smile, in an understated way, he addresses the group. The topic has brought his attention back to a prayer he had written long ago as the culmination of a year-long group experience. He reads the prayer aloud to the group, and as he speaks, a hush falls over them. The beauty, the humor, and the sincerity, the truthfulness of Dan's own prayer stirs us deeply. It is a moment of awe and intimacy. So this normally reserved man, together with a small group of people whom he had come to know and trust, took a risk, shared with the group a prayer that expressed some of the deepest longings of his spirit. Not only was he affirmed by the awe with which the prayer was received by the group, but the other group members were touched deeply by what he shared. These are the kinds of spaces of intimate safety that can be ours as well. If it is true, as James Luther Adams has said, that church is the place where we get to practice what it means to be human, then our call to respond as a church is to set up safe practice spaces. And one of the things I've admired most about this church for almost 20 years now is that even more than most UU churches I know, you've been effective at building a network of small groups, the branches groups, that can do just that. I want to note that we have an opportunity coming up this coming month in September. We're inviting those who have been involved in the Branches program for some time to recommit, either to make clear to us that they fully intend to stay in the group that they're in, or if they need to drop out, to let us know that, or if they're looking to change to a different group, to let us know that so we can help facilitate it. And just as importantly, we are opening space, particularly in September, to invite new people to join groups. And groups that will resume in-person meetings as soon as this spike lowers enough in COVID numbers to make it safe for us to do so. But even once that happens, we also will be continuing with an online branches presence, as we have leaders who are committed to offering a Zoom-based branches experience. Engaging in these branches groups are ways that we can establish safe spaces in our church, in the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge, to engage this deep work and perhaps build some more intimacy with one another in the process. Until then, I hope we can all cultivate spaces in our lives to create intimacy, be it with lovers, family, friends, or fellow church members. I can't help thinking again about my friend Nick. It happened coincidentally that just last night, as I was making final revisions to this sermon, I saw one of his infrequent social media posts sharing the news that he, as of the next day, as of today, is moving out of the state of Texas. Job promotion causing him to move to another state. I commented wishing him well in his travels and moving into this new place, and let him know that when my travels took me near where he will be moving to, I look forward to seeing him again. Because like I found with him, I think it's true for many of us that when we share with those we trust, with those we love, what's furthest within us, when we offer one another those waters that come from the deepest wells of our souls, we're nourishing each other's spirits, we're enriching one another's lives. Yes, the risks of opening ourselves to others are real. Henry Nauen learned that painfully. But the risks of denying ourselves any possibility of intimacy, of sealing off our wells, are far worse. Without even the chance at intimacy in our lives, our spirits can dry up and disconnect ourselves from pieces of our very humanity. So instead of that, May we all find the wholeness of self that comes from making connections deeply, authentically, and intimately with one another. So may it be for us all. Amen.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a sword of love and a rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a sword of love and a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a sword of love and a rose in the winter time. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a sword of love and a rose in the winter time.
And so, as we go forth from this sacred time, from the many sacred spaces in which we have gathered, may we go knowing ourselves to be graced with blessings, blessings of freedom and blessings of wholeness. For though our worship may now end, our service begins anew. So let us go forth, finding ever new ways to serve this hurting world in the spirit of love. Thank you for joining us. Go in peace.